It's Christmas Eve, and actually this year it's the final episode of HutVent. Several people have pointed out to us that Advent calendars actually finish on Christmas Eve, not Christmas Day. So we thought we'd bring it into line. So today, something a little bit different. The Christmas Truce is something which always crops up at this time of year. There's an awful lot of rubbish which pops up online, all sorts of photographs posted which bear no relationship whatsoever to the Christmas Truce. And nowadays it's even worse with the arrival of AI and all the awful stuff that goes with it. So here's a story about the centenary of the Christmas Truce 10 years ago, and a story about material culture, and a story about bringing the story of the Christmas Truce to the masses, to more people probably in one go than anybody ever had before. And we were very, very lucky because the Great War Huts team and Khaki Devil, the sort of the everyday business as it were directly responsible for it. We had a major hand in it. And that is the Sainsbury's Christmas advert from 2014, which featured the Christmas Truce. The story starts back in 2008, really. We got involved in a production of a Hovis advert called Go On Lad, which was a special advert for 122 years of Hovis. And the advert was 122 seconds long. Little lad comes out of the baker's shop. He runs all the way through the century, past the suffragettes, past First War soldiers, you name it, and ends up in the present day. And the production company were called Rattling Stick, and the director was a fella called Ringan Ledwidge. And Ringan had a very famous First World War great uncle. He was Francis Ledwidge, who was the Irish poet who was killed at Passchendaele. And we got involved because we heard that this was going on, and I managed to get hold of somebody in the production company and said, look, can we help? And they said, well, what we really want for our scene, we really want 200 First War soldiers marching down the road, but actually we can only afford 100. And I said, well, tell you what, if we can bring you 200 for what you're expecting to pay for 100, and we'll bring them all to Liverpool for the filming, how does that sound? Which basically got us into the advertising business, which was a great place to be. And the day was a huge success. We managed to bring all these fellas together, and they come marching down the street in Liverpool, all in perfect step. And at the outset, the production company were thinking it was going to be a nightmare between takes. People are going to be wandering around, and they weren't. They all behaved themselves. The fellas behaved impeccably. The resets were quick, and by the finish of it, they managed to knock it on the head and go home early, which is pretty unheard of for something like that. And in 2014, we were working in the office one day and the phone rang. And out of the blue, it's Ringan Ledwidge, the director of the Hovis ad. And this is pretty unheard of. Directors from advertising agencies do not ring up, or production companies don't ring up people like us and say, oh, will you help make me another advert? But that's exactly what he was asking. He said, it's obviously the centenary of the Christmas Truce. We're very keen to make an advert for Sainsbury's. We want to pitch for it, but we're only going to pitch for it if your fellas are going to be able to help us again, because it went so smoothly last time. And he said, obviously, it's all about the football. And I said, well, let me stop you right there, because the 1914 truce was really not all about the football. In fact, out of 30,000 British soldiers who were in or near the front line over that Christmas period, if 30 of them kicked the ball about with the Germans, I'd be surprised. So if it's all about the football, we're not interested. And we left it at that. And over the next couple of months, he rang up 2 more times. And between the second and third time, something happened. And that was that Dick Rayner, a military historian up in Norfolk, sent me some details of the 1st Battalion, the Norfolk Regiment, who'd taken part in the truce. And on the notes of the last press cutting he'd sent me, he said, I think you'll like this. And it was a fella called Wyatt. And Corporal Wyatt of the 1st Norfolks had sent a letter home, which was published in a Thetford newspaper, and basically said, this is what we did on Christmas Day, blah, 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 blah. Oh, and we ended up the same old way, having a kickabout with the football with the Germans. And suddenly there was some proper corroboration, because they'd been mentioned by fellows of the 6th Cheshires who'd taken part in the truce as well, but there was only one company in the 6th Cheshires. They were attached to the Norfolks. And there was a couple of accounts from them, plus some spurious ones. And suddenly there was something from the Norfolks which also tied it all together. It wasn't a proper match. It was just a kickabout. And so we thought, actually, tell you what we could do. We could base what we're doing for the advert on what happened at Wolverhampton between the Norfolks, a small group of Cheshires, and the Germans. So when Ringen rang back again, I said, okay, yeah, we've thought about this, but there is a condition. The condition is that you play down the football and you let us show some of the other stuff that was going on at the same time. So ultimately in the advert, you'll see hair cutting and swapping photographs, all sorts of other stuff as well that went on. And it was actually quite remarkable. The whole thing was filmed in the August of 2014, blazing hot sun. They'd used dissolvable snow, which was made of paper, and they'd done it all the night before to speed things up before the first day of shooting. And needless to say, it had rained overnight, so the whole lot had gone and they had to do it again. But it all went pretty much like clockwork. And what we'd done, thinking that it might be a bit controversial, we'd gone out of our way to make it as accurate as we possibly could. So we made sure that all the fellas that appear on screen, the British soldiers, were 3/4 1st Norfolks and a quarter of them members of C Company of the 1st 6th Cheshire Territorials. The Germans, we cheated the Germans ever so slightly because they were, the Norfolks were opposite Infantry Regiment, Reserve Infantry Regiment 16, right on the border with Infantry Regiment 104, who were Saxons. But we thought, actually, we're going to need to nudge this sideways slightly because Reserve Infantry Regiment 16 was Hitler's regiment. And we thought, whatever we do, the Sainsbury's PR department are never going to forgive us if we end up, using the regiment with Hitler in it, despite the fact that the fungus-faced future Führer was sitting sulking in Messines Church crypt for the day, complaining about the fact that his colleagues were out trucing with the Brits. Anyway, so we just nudged it slightly to Infantry Regiment 104. The only other thing that definitely didn't happen was the fact that Sainsbury's wanted a British soldier to get out of the trench first, which in virtually every case, in fact, I don't think I've ever come across a case where the British started a truce. But apart from that, the rest of it was as accurate as we could possibly make it in terms of detail. Everything that we put on the screen is stuff that we knew that had happened at Wolverhampton on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, 1914. And there was a lot of detail, a lot of stuff in the war diary. Every platoon commander had to write a report afterwards, presumably because the commanding officer was not impressed that they'd all been out mooching with the Germans. So all of them had written a little note, which pretty much all said the same thing. Well, it wasn't anything to do with us. The unit on our right, they started getting out of the trenches. They went and met the Germans, and the Germans opposite us started coming towards us. And, well, what could we do? If we let them get too close, they'll see into our trenches. So we thought we'd better go out and meet them. Anyway, there was lots and lots of evidence to prove exactly what happened. In the aftermath, when it came out, hugely successful. 30-odd million views before Christmas itself, plus whatever came afterwards. And there were plenty of people saying, oh, it's a load of old nonsense. Senior academic historians, friends of mine, saying, oh, loved your advert, but history was rubbish. And you go, actually, no, it wasn't, because we've spent years studying the truce. Way back until 1999 was when I first started studying it in detail. So we know the history of the Christmas Truce and you don't. Oh, yeah, but Christmas Truce was all about burying the dead. Well, it might be. But the Norfolk Regiment had taken no part in the disastrous attacks on the 18th, 19th of December, so they didn't have any dead to bury. So they didn't bury any dead, which is borne out by all the paperwork. So we really made the most accurate portrayal of a particular part of the Christmas Truce that we possibly could. And everything we put on screen, we know happened at that spot. As I say, with the two caveats of the, nudging the German regiment slightly sideways and having a British soldier getting out of the trench first. The other thing that often crops up is that, it was all about selling chocolate. But right at the outset, even when we'd started filming, chocolate wasn't on anybody's radar. In the script, it just says that the British or the German soldier found a gift in his pocket. And I think it was the Thursday morning when they got to the stage where they were discussing the filming for the day and what was going to happen and what the scenes were going to be. And at that point, they were debating, what would he have in his pocket? What gifts could it be? And obviously, it wasn't going to be cigarettes and tobacco. So I said, well, it might be Christmas puddings, or it might be this, or it might be that, or the Germans had pipes, or whatever. And I said, well, and also obviously there was chocolate. And nearby was somebody from, I think, from Sainsbury's PR department, and straight away he leapt on it. Went, chocolate? You say chocolate? Right, make it chocolate. And that's how it came about there and then. That's how the whole thing with chocolate was born in that very moment. And over the next few weeks, Sainsbury's literally had chocolate made especially for the advert and to tie in with it, and decided that the best thing to do was that every penny of it would go to the Royal British Legion, and that's exactly what happened. And they made an enormous sum of money for great causes. So as I say, every now and again, it still crops up. People still say, "Oh, that Christmas Truce advert." I've known government departments to have lectures from certain historians who've been and told them that it was all a load of old rubbish, but it wasn't. It really wasn't. We were involved in an awful lot of stuff during the centenary. We made a lot of programs for a lot of production companies with all sorts of TV channels, and I can't think of any of them that had any portrayal of a particular event that was as accurate as what we put on screen for the Christmas Truce of 1914, for that Sainsbury's Christmas Truce advert. Sadly, in 2021, Ring and Ledwidge died at the age of 50. And to my shame, I didn't even realise that at the time. It was only in more recent times I discovered that. So really, this final HutVent of the year is a bit of a tribute to him. He's not a First War soldier, even though his great uncle was, and a very famous one at that. But Ringham was an extraordinary creative. He really was. He made some incredible adverts and music videos, and obviously, the thing with adverts and music videos is that you never really know the people behind them. But he really was a right at the top of his game. He really was, and the fact that twice we got to work with him, and in particular on the second occasion he rang up specifically to ask for us to work with him, is an honour and a pleasure that we shall always treasure. So that's it for HutVent 2024. It's been a pleasure as always. Thanks to all of you for watching, and everybody here at Great War Huts for all the work that goes on behind the scenes to make them, and there's a lot of hard work to do that. And we're incredibly grateful for all of your support. Please do carry on liking them and retweeting them or whatever, and sharing them, and do sign up to the Great War Huts YouTube channel, because you never know what else we might be doing. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you in 2025.